Hey everyone, this is 8-Bit Flashback, and today I'm going to take a look back at the RetroN 3. These have been out for a while now, but I just recently picked up one for about 35 bucks used. So let's find out if the RetroN 3 is worth 35 bucks. So if you're looking to get a RetroN 3 that's made by Hyperkin, you can find these on eBay for about 55 bucks new. And if you're looking for a used one, you can find these for about 35 to 40 bucks. I lucked out and I found one here locally that was in mint condition for only 35 bucks, so it seemed like a pretty good deal. So inside the box, it does come with an S video cable, and this cable is pretty beefy, and also a set of composite cables. It also includes two wireless controllers. These are the newer model controllers that are 2.4 gigahertz, so they do work a little bit better, but they still have some issues. As far as the cosmetic construction of the controller, it's pretty decent, but as far as the way it performs, there's some issues with lag. And the lag seems to happen the most when you're not pushing buttons for a few seconds, like say there's a cutscene and you go to push a button, there seems to be about a quarter-second lag before it reacts. So to some people this might be a big issue, but for others, this could be a huge deal. And the lag by no means is happening all the time, it just kind of happens sporadically. So if you're looking to avoid any lag issues, you're probably better off just getting some wired controllers, like this one here. This is a premium Sega Genesis controller made by Hyperkin, and I really like this controller. The build quality on it's great, it performs great, it's a nice controller. And you can get this controller new for under 10 bucks. But if you're looking to play with a wired controller, you have to get one for each specific system. So this Sega Genesis controller will only work for the Sega Genesis. If you want a Super Nintendo controller, you're gonna have to get a wired controller for that, and same thing for Nintendo. And on the top of the machine is where our power button is located. We have the power button here, the reset button. We have a selector switch where we can select the NES, the Genesis, or the Super Nintendo. On the back, we have our composite ports. We also have a region switch for Sega Genesis games only, and an S-Video out. But unfortunately, the S-Video is only for Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. So today I'm going to be testing all different kinds of cartridges out. I'll be testing the Game Genies for all three systems. For the Sega Genesis, I'll be testing Shining Force. And this is probably one of the best RPGs available for the Sega Genesis. And I'm also going to be testing Jordan vs. Bird for Nintendo, and this is one of the very few times that Jordan actually appeared in a basketball video game, and I think the only time he appeared on the NES. Then for Super Nintendo, we're going to be testing out an old school football game. We're going to be testing Madden 94. And besides the Game Genies, I'm also going to be testing some other cartridges out, mainly for the Sega Genesis. I'll be testing the Sega Genesis Everdrive cartridge. And this is actually the unofficial bootleg version, but it still works really well. I'm also going to be testing Sonic & Knuckles, and test the lock-on technology with Sonic 2. Also, I'll be testing out Virtua Racing. This is the only Sega Genesis game that had that SVP chip, so I thought it'd be a good cartridge to test out. And I'll be testing on a Multicart. This is a Mega Drive Multicart 32-in-1. So I'm going to start with testing all the Game Genies out, and the console starts to look a little crazy when you get all these plugged in at the same time. But this is my kind of crazy, and I like it. And one thing I do like about the RetroN 3 is it's super easy to switch between the three systems. So I'm powered up now, and this is my Game Genie for the original Nintendo. So now I'm going to turn the switch to the Sega Genesis. Now that boots up right away. Now I'm going to turn it one more time, and that'll boot up the Super Nintendo. So you can change between the three systems really quick. Okay, now I'm going to test out a code for Madden 94 on the Super Nintendo, and this is a code for unlimited first downs. EA Sports. It's in the game. This video game series has been around forever. It made its debut way back in 1988 on the Apple II. So if this code's working correctly, no matter what I do, I should end up with a first down. First down. First and 24. So now I'm even going to go backwards. I'm going to lose more yards, but I'm still going to have a first down. Let's go back a little farther. Come on, come get me. Oop. And first down. Boy, I sure could have used this code when I was a kid. I used to play this game against my uncle, and he would just slaughter me. This code would have come in really handy. So even though the Game Genie codes worked great with Madden Football, I did test out another Super Nintendo game, The Secret of Mana. And there's all kinds of Game Genie codes out there listed for it, and none of them would work. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but I figured I should let you know. Okay, and now I'm going to test out the Game Genie for the Sega Genesis. And I'm going to enter a code for infinite money for the game Shining Force. Sega. Okay, I just need to find some stuff to buy and see if my money stays there. How can we help you? I need to buy the most expensive thing you have. What do you got? Steel arrow for 1200. That'll do. And I'm going to give it to Chris. Chris can't use this. Do you still want it? Yeah, why not? I got plenty of money. Anything else? Sure. I'll take another arrow. So I tested multiple games for the Game Genie on the Sega Genesis, and I haven't run into any issues yet. They all seem to work fine. Now I'm going to test out the Game Genie for the original Nintendo, and this code is for Jordan vs. Bird, NY Piss, and nothing against New York. I was just trying a bunch of random codes, and that was the only one that worked. So with this code here, it actually makes Jordan disappear. So I'm going to go for a dunk. And when I go for the dunk, he should disappear. And when he's playing defense, if he's anywhere inside the 3-point line, he's invisible. So if I go on the outside of that 3-point line, I reappear. And this code really isn't that useful. It's just kind of neat that he disappears and reappears. It's kind of fun to play with. Now I've got one more code I'm going to try out, and this is also NY, but this is a little bit nicer sounding code, NY Pals. And with this code, I call this Max Air Jordan. And what happens with this code is when you go to dunk, he ends up freezing in midair and goes through all these different poses. And I think eventually what would happen is he would dunk the ball, but he's going in super slow motion. So what happens is the time clock runs out before he can actually dunk the ball. Talk about some serious hang time. 3, 2, 1. And then when it goes into defense mode, it just starts to glitch out like crazy. It throws up all these codes and numbers. It's a crazy looking glitch. Now I'm testing out Sonic & Knuckles cartridge by itself to see if that game works first. And this game by itself seems to work just fine. I don't see any issues. And as far as emulation goes, for the games I played so far, all the emulation seems to be right on. It doesn't seem to be too fast or too slow. The only issues I have, like I said earlier in the video, is there's just a little bit of lag once in a while with the controller. Now I'm going to add the game Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to Sonic & Knuckles to test out that lock-on technology. And the game seems to load and play just fine. And I never really was a big Knuckles fan. I mean, it was cool that it added different elements to the game, but I was way more into playing as Sonic. Now I'm going to test out a clone Everdrive cartridge to see how that works. So I'm going to select a game to flash to the cartridge. So I'm going to pick Sega Arcade Classics. So right now it's flashing the game to the cartridge. And now I'm going to test out Centipede. So I tested out a handful of games with this Everdrive cartridge, and they all seem to work without any issues. Now I'm going to test out the game Virtua Racing, and this is the only Genesis game to feature that SVP chip. And when I power up the game, all I get is a black screen, nothing happens. And from what I've heard, to make this game work, there's a special 5-volt power that's supplied to one of the pins on the cartridge slot that's present on the Genesis Model 1 and 2, but none of the clones. Now I'm going to test a 32-in-1 Mega Drive cartridge, and unfortunately it doesn't plug into the cartridge slot correctly, it doesn't fit. But to make it work, I can just use my Game Genie and then load that into the cartridge slot. So once it boots up, I can just start the game with no codes, and then just select whatever game I want to play, and the cartridge seems to work just fine using the Game Genie to load it. So overall, the cartridge compatibility between all three systems seems to be very good. A lot of the other clone systems out there that are available are not compatible with all these special cartridges, such as the Game Genie, the Everdrive, etc. So for me, I find that pretty impressive. So overall, I'd say the RetroN 3 is well worth $35, and I'd even say it's worth the new price tag of $55. When you consider if you bought all three of the original systems, you'd spend way over that. The emulation for all three systems seems to be pretty good, although I did notice with the Super Nintendo, the sound seems kinda loud and maybe just a little bit distorted, but just a little. The S-video output that's available for the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo does look really nice, and it's a big improvement over composite, but it is disappointing that the S-Video is not compatible with NES. And I'm not the biggest fan of the way this console looks. I mean, it's not terrible, but I wish it resembled at least one of the original consoles. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked that video, please click that like button. If you want to hear more from me, please subscribe. And if you want to help support or sponsor the channel, you can now find me on Facebook and Patreon. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.